Kristen Atchison here, and we are on lecture 3 on early capacities in infancy. Today we're going to be talking about motor development. So in motor development, let's get some vocabulary out of the way. Prehension is the ability to use hand tools for eating, building, and exploring. So when you hear about something being prehensile, it means that you can grab a hold, your thing can grab a hold of it. So like an opossum's tail is prehensile. It can grab on. So we do this with our hands. Our thumb gives us the ability to use tools, eating, building, and exploring. The other thing we need to remember is that development is cephalocaudal, and I love this word. Cephalocaudal means from the head outwards, cephala from head. So it's from the head to foot, so that our motor development starts with our head and our neck and then moves out. Another vocabulary term is that development is always proximodistal. This is the idea that it goes from the center to parts further away. So we're going to be able to have motor control over our trunk before we have motor control over our fingers. We're going to have those big gross motor skills, the big skills like walking and moving your arms, before we have those fine motor skills in our hands and our fingers. And the other thing that's really important is that culture really influences motor development. Just like we've talked about already, that input dictates the output. And so we'll see differences in motor development based on the culture and what the culture says is important. So first, let's talk about from creeping to crawling. It's cephalocaudal again, and then the phases in development from creeping to crawling. Newborns again start by making pushing movements with their knees and toes. Really, before they can do that, they're having to develop some kind of neck muscles, some ability to hold their head, these sorts of things. Next, they're going to develop the ability to really hold their head up. So again, this is where they've got that taken care of. They've got really strong ability to do that. Next, we'll go down to the shoulder, head, and shoulders. That's going to increase. It's not just our neck muscles now. Now we're down to our shoulders. You can see kind of that ability. And then we're going to go into support our upper body with our arms, okay? So you can see how this is cephalocaudal. It's kind of moving down, head, neck, shoulders, arms. So you can see that progression. Next, we're going to have the ability to kind of coordinate that shoulders and that midsection in that crawling, okay? So again, cephalocaudal, where we went from the arms, now we're into the midsection. But we're not able to do the midsection and the head at the same time. That's too hard. That's too difficult to coordinate those muscles. Next, we'll be able to put those two pieces together, that head piece that we had much, much earlier with that midsection piece together, and have the head and the midsection up. They don't really have the coordination of their arms and the legs yet, so there's a lot of rocking back and forth in this stage. It's like the ready, set, go over and over and over again. And finally, we'll really get those coordinated movements and that enables the baby to crawl. So here's a video of my godson Matthew crawling. He's a really, really experienced crawler. He's about to be 1 in this video, and he's about to walk. So he's taken a couple of steps already, and so this is really, he's in transition, and so this is why he's so good at crawling. He crawled and pulled on it and pulled it down your foot yesterday. Almost on himself. He crawls over, he's interested in something.
Hey, Matthew.
I'm trying to get a good video.
Come here. Look, I got it right here. Look, Matthew. Come here. Come get it. Come get it.
So you can see he was really fast. He was really excited, and it was really fast at the end. So that's an experienced crawler. He's got all the pieces together, and he can do it really, really well. And again, he's transitioning into walking. And so he's taken a couple of steps, 1 or 2, but he's still way more comfortable in crawling. He's not really using walking as his main mode of transportation now. Whereas here's a video of Liam, who is.
Come on, push. Yep. Squat. Yeah. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Yay. Yeah, come on. Good job.
this is when Liam really started walking, and so that's why everybody's so excited. But you can see he's walking. He was able to coordinate. He didn't have to pull up on something to take those steps. He was able to use his body just to pull himself up. And those kinds of muscles are important and to be able to kind of move himself. So, Liam and Matthew are kind of just like two sides of the same coin at this point in these two videos. So Matthew is about to take off like Liam just did. And so we'll see this progression from one to the other. Make sure you watch that Karen Adolph video that's online that really talks about kind of these differences. And when we have these differences between rocking and from crawling to walking, we have to relearn different abilities. So that Karen Adolph video will really talk about that more. The other thing with development is, again, it's proximodistal. So again, that's from the center to the extremities. We do our trunk and our shoulders before we do our arms and our fingers. We can reach and swipe at things really, really early because that's going to be kind of our whole arm moving. Whereas we don't see visually guided reaching and grasping until more 3 to 4 months. And we don't see that fine motor control of fingers until much later. So again, it's proximodistal, where we get that ability to kind of move at the shoulder, the arm at the shoulder, before we're able to get it at the elbow, before we at the wrist and the fingers. It's that proximodistal. So again, first, when we do start to get to those fingers, we still have kind of that proximodistal thing going on. So really, really early on, at 28 weeks, we're going to kind of grasp things with our whole hand. So if you take a block or a penny or something small like a bead, and you put your whole hand over it and you use your hand to grasp it and kind of your fingers, but it's really your hand that's doing a lot of that. That's that grasping. It's not till about 36 weeks that we get this more differentiated finger movements. So at 28 weeks, we're going that ulnar grasp. We rake things into the hand where we use all of our fingers. So kind of use your fingers as a rake. Raking things into the palm to pick them up. 36 weeks, we can rest our hand on the table. We can use our thumb in the grasping. So rest your hand on the table next to a block or something and use your thumb to grasp it against you. Again, that's going to be more fine motor control than using all those fingers as a whole. Again, that's examples of proximodistal. And then 52 weeks is really when we can see that pincer grasp, where it's that finger and thumb grasping. Think about kind of picking up a Cheerio, that kind of thing, or picking up a block with your thumb and your forefinger. And they can do this unsupported. Their hand doesn't need to be supported to do that. So again, we're still seeing that same progression in motor development. After 2, we're still seeing progressions in motor development, but it's going to include kind of differentiation on those walking skills, right? So running and jumping and hopping and galloping and skipping, things like that. Throwing and catching balls, steering a tricycle, swinging on bars, things like that. These are the things that are happening between 2 and 6 years. What parents really like about that is then that we have this development in self-help skills. So things that they're able to do themselves. So put on and remove simple clothing from 2 to 3 using a spoon effectively. They may be trying to use spoons beforehand, but it's not going to be as effective. 3 to 4, kind of starting to use buttons and scissors, self-serves themselves food. 4 to 5, really effective use of the fork. 5 to 6, being able to use a knife to cut soft food, tying shoes, things like that. And again, you can see that first we're starting out as these kind of bigger movements and narrowing down to these more fine motor skills. These, again, you see that same proximodistal development in these self-help skills. Drawing is another one of those fine motor skills. We see scribbling around 2. We see the first kind of representational forms around 3. At 3 to 4, they can copy straight lines and a circle. They can copy letters, maybe. Sometimes their picture of a person kind of looks like a tadpole, like a circle with a line. But they're trying. They're putting these pieces together. 4 to 5, we're getting better copying of things, copying of shapes, lining up two lines and a cross. Again, success at some level, letters. Drawing, we see more realistic drawings from 5 to 6. The person will have 5 to 6 parts, and they can copy words and numbers. Drawing, again, these timelines are cultural dependent. So different cultures have different values of art, and schooling is a really important development in drawing as well, and all these kind of fine motor skills. As you see, elementary schools focusing more on writing earlier, you see kind of increases in when these children are doing these things. So the culture is really dictating kind of when some of these fine motor skills are happening. And there's different research about whether that's beneficial or not, and we'll talk about that when we get to education. But we see that this schooling, this teaching, the better the input, will get different output for that. So there's a study that looked at the progression of drawing in a culture that didn't draw. And what was really interesting is when they were teaching drawing to these adults, they found that same kind of progression. So first we saw scribbles, then we kind of started to get those kind of more shape-like, some of those, but they're still kind of non-representational. Then we kind of got into some more representational shapes. These are all drawings by adults, okay? These are not kids doing these. These are adults that are in a culture that didn't teach drawing, that didn't teach writing. And so this was something that they were being taught as adults. And again, we're seeing that same progression of incorporating more parts, incorporating more details into the drawing until we get what looks more like a person, right? And so we saw that same developmental progression in drawing in adults in a non-drawing culture that we do in children. So again, it's culturally dependent as to when these things are happening, but the progression of them is very, very similar. Here's a video of early printing. So again, at around 4, we'll start to see the distinction between writing and drawing. If you've ever heard a 3-year-old say, I can draw my name, or I can draw this letter, because they don't see them as different. They don't see writing as drawing as different. And that's a difference in that representational ability. So that's a cognitive difference. It's not an issue with what they're doing with their motor skills. It's that they're seeing that, hey, these letters represent something different than these drawings do. So here's Joseph writing his name.
That's a beautiful S. He's good with the S's.
Look the letter E. And look the letter P. Look at H-O-S-E-P. Out!
So you could see that this was more drawing than it was writing. He could write his name, but he saw it as more drawing. You saw that kind of flourish on the H. He obviously was very proud of himself and showing himself to the Tomcat app. But you see kind of that ability there, those skill sets. It was a lot more like drawing than it was like writing in this very early age. Okay, well that ends our discussion of motor development.